Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're at the Dewey Short Visitor Center out at Table Rock Lake for a free attraction outside of Branson. Now this is a place that you're going to want to come if you enjoy recreating out on Table Rock, because it tells you a little bit of the history but also gives you some great information for tourism. So today we're going to go check it out and see what's inside. The first thing you find when you come inside are all of these maps and information pieces. It tells you a little bit more about some of the state parks in this area, some of the rules, some of the things that might be handy, and also reminds you to recreate safely. Now, I personally love coming here because they have information about the hiking trails in the area. So you can pick up small maps, you can learn about closures, and then also some of the history that you can find along the trails.
Approximately $106 million. But there is another benefit of Table Rock Dam.
Now, just to kind of give you guys some context, there is a theater here that tells you a little bit more about the construction of the dam and then also the White River. And I think it's wonderful and definitely something you should check out. I can't show you the whole thing because it's a little lengthy, but at the same time, well worth it. So come out and then check the time above the door, come on in, and definitely get some brain wrinkles from that one. But now that I have these brain wrinkles, let's go implement them into other displays here at the Visitor Center. It'll all bring together the full story of the White River region and then also what makes the Dewey Short a must-see whenever you're here in Branson. Now, the other nice thing about the Dewey Short is that it is handicap accessible, so they do have an elevator here if you want to go up to the top floor or down to the bottom. I love that because I think it's super convenient and handy, but also if you look from the various layers, you see different parts of the displays. For example, from this layer looking down, you can see there are some people moving around, but if you look at the floor, you can see where the waterways actually are running through, and that's significant because that is actually the White River. But in addition, on each layer, they have different informative signs, like this one right here talking about the Ozark Mountains. Did you know that the Ozarks are actually larger than the state of Louisiana? Yep, they actually are, and they're the most extensive mountain range between the Appalachians and the Rockies. Their highest peak is actually located in Arkansas, and it's Mount Magazine. And we might go there on a future adventure. In addition, you can find out a little bit more about Table Rock Lake and Dam and the construction, not only from the video, but also from these signs. For example, did you know that this is what it looked like as it was being constructed? I learned while watching the video just now that actually 2 people perished during the construction of this dam. And despite the fact that this was an extensive project, there were only a handful of injuries that were actually reported to be serious. Now, at the time of the construction, this thing was costly, $66 million. But if you were to take that and modify it for today's standards, it would be about $500 million now, which is wild. But also the man hours that went into this. Let me show you. This guy right here displays what says it all: 1,500,000 total days of labor. And if you were to take one person and have them work every day, that would be the equivalent of 4,000 years for a single person to work. Now, at the Dewey Short, again, you can get a great view of the dam right out these doors. And we'll be looking at that in a couple of moments, and I'll also show you a couple of other perspectives of it as well. But this dam is a feat, to say the least. It was constructed in the late 1950s, and originally they had hoped to start on this well before World War II. But World War II scaled back everyone's efforts and also took a lot of the materials, so they couldn't be working on projects like this. It took quite a while, in fact, before they actually broke ground with the first shovel and poured the first little bit of cement. In fact, because of that, they were thinking that this project was going to be something that would be super helpful and useful. However, they had no idea that they would be racing against time with that new timeline because of some crazy flooding. The crazy flooding that they had at that time actually occurred when they were already well into the construction. They were expecting some rains. The rains continued coming, and between February and May, they worked tirelessly to try to get the dam up to the very top. In fact, they said that during this final push between February and May, it was probably the hardest work that they had done on the entire thing, and it was crazy, but the river still won out, and ultimately it created an overflow which flooded the downward lands. Now, you might not think too much of this considering that now it has this nice little channel, but at the time they weren't really prepared, so the infrastructure was not there and the roadways were a full-on wash. They had to bring in ferries for people to get from point A to point B, and it was really wild. Not to mention, while they were doing this relocation, they were still in the process of trying to relocate some of the cemeteries that were along the way. In fact, 9 cemeteries had to be relocated so that the path of this great area would be contained and also not disruptive. So that was a lot of pressure for them, but now let's go back inside and find out more. Along this wall, you actually find the headwaters all the way to the Mississippi, and it stair steps down along with the actual stairs so that you can see the sharp distance between this upper portion and the lower portion in a very visual way that allows you to see how the water actually moves down and slowly becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. In fact, we start up here at Boston, and by the time that we've made it to where I'm currently standing, that's Branson, and there is a massive drop from like 2,000 feet to here. In fact, here where Lake Taneycomo and the city of Branson are, it's only 701 feet, and Table Rock Lake is at 915 feet. So even between those two, huge difference. Again, as we get into the bottom layer, you can see on the ground the riverway, and you'll see a few dots along the way, like this one here at Shell Knob. And as you continue going, each one of these dots is symbolic of a location. But long before the construction of the dam, people inhabited this area, and the original people who lived in this area actually had given the White River its first name. And here you can find a timeline of all of the history of this region and who all has inhabited this space, when things changed, what tribes once called this home and still do to this time even today, and even more. You can even trace this particular region to statehood. For example, Missouri and Arkansas, both very involved in this project, both have their statehood listed right here. Not to mention various points of interest of things that have happened in this region. For example, did you know that there were over 10 battles in the Civil War that happened between Arkansas and Missouri? We traveled to some of the battlefields previously, but this kind of puts it all into perspective as to when that would have happened in the bigger picture. And let me tell you, there's a lot of history in this region well before that even, and there will be as it continues to roll on down the way, and people like us have our moment to shine here as well. And I think that that's what's really great, is that we're constantly writing more pieces of history that one day will be on display in a place like this. Table Rock Dam was considered to be an engineering marvel, and the dam construction lasted only 5 years, despite the fact that it is such a large project. This project now actually is quite a feat to see in person, and as you're driving across it, a lot of times we take for granted the hard work that went into it, but not today. In fact, through displays like these, you can see what it would have been like to do the construction at that time, and through display boards and interactive exhibits like the ones we see in front of us, you can learn a little bit more about what it would have taken to make this happen. For example, did you know that just to get some of the products here, they had to completely build roads? They also had to find a way to get product from just about 2 miles up the road to the construction site, and they wanted to do it the most effective way. So they created a conveyor belt system that actually brought the rock down for all of that distance, and then it could be right out here at the construction site with ease without having to have someone manually driving it back and forth and losing that time. Because of that, they were able to complete the project in a much more reasonable time frame than some of the projects that we've seen along the way, like the Hoover Dam.
are suffering from yet another flood on the White River. Homes, businesses, and farmland throughout the river basin are being severely damaged or destroyed by rising water.
Now, as you can imagine, there were many reasons for which the dam was officially built. However, one of the main ones was flood control. Floods were really, really harsh on this area for a series of years, and because of that, many times people wanted to give up. Realistically, their lands were being flooded, and so what did they do? They started coming up with ideas. And in this display that's behind us, you can actually see what it would be like to have to plan for something like this to happen. Now, a couple of questions that they pose here that I think we all should be asking ourselves, whether we live near Table Rock Dam or whether we live in just a regular, normal, everyday place. Do you have a plan? Because these questions will help you. In this display right here, you see a boat with all sorts of interesting supplies in it. But the drawers actually pull out and ask you, the floodwaters are nearing your home and you have been asked to evacuate. What will you take? Have you ever pondered that question? If not, maybe you should. But there's another drawer. What does this one say? The White River Valley can still flood. The flood of 2011 was a record breaker, but having a dam and lake system on the White River greatly reduced the damage that could have affected many more people. Now, I will say this. Last time I was in Branson was in the summer, early summer, super early summer, and they had to unleash the floodgates. Now, what does that mean? Well, when the water capacity upstream becomes more and more, it gets closer and closer to toppling dams or levees, and because of that, they need to relieve some of that pressure so that doesn't happen. So what they do is they start opening floodgates downstream, and a little bit of water can flow out that way and go toward the lower areas slowly and in a controlled way versus a topple, which would cause a total devastation flood. And so whenever I was here, they were doing that, and it was amazing to see. I don't think I've ever witnessed that at Table Rock before, so it was kind of interesting. But in those moments where everything is kind of pushed to the brink, those are the moments that you need to be considering what you would do. Now, a lot of times we don't think about those things because we think we're in a safe distance, but check to see if you're in a flood zone. Because if you are in a low-lying area and you do have one of these dams near you, you might want to have a plan. On this screen, they have a little challenge for everyone to become an operator. And here it asks you the very question we just talked about. Heavy rain is forecasted in the Table Rock Lake area, and the lake is near capacity. What do you do? And here you can respond with a series of buttons. I definitely encourage you guys to interact whenever you're here. This will put it all into perspective if you're not here during flood season. Also, they have a few other interesting things like the cresting chart here. You'll notice that the water used to crest at a very high rate. 52.9 is where it topped off in January 1916. But now, even in the most recent year, April 2011, 29.3. That is a much lower rate of cresting than in previous years before the dam. Did you know that Congress actually authorized the Corps of Engineers in the 1930s to start building dams? It was obvious that there was a problem and that flood control was going to be essential because too many communities were experiencing things like this picture right here. And in 1936, the Flood Control Act was passed, and amongst that, 270 projects were taken on, but 73 of those were in Arkansas and Missouri. And I think that learning those kinds of things is fascinating because you get to kind of see how the time progression has changed the way that we do things even today. Now, a lot of times there's a lot of harsh criticism for example, Katrina, because the levees did fail and those were expected to hold up. However, natural disasters do some crazy things, and people like the Corps comes back in and they fix those things. And so the Corps has been such an important part of our society today, and a lot of times they don't get the praise that they deserve for all of the infrastructure they've done. So these people are definitely people who we should be thanking a bit more. As we continue to move through the display, you see a bit more of the construction of the dam from the side. And here you have a waterway that comes down and it goes into turbines. These turbines then go to generators. And these generators actually produce electricity for many homes and businesses in the area. This is one of the cleanest versions of power that there is, and Table Rock is just one of many dams in this series that actually produces the electricity that is used right here in Branson. If you were to go inside the dam, you might see something that looks like this. This is actually the powerhouse control room, and you can see some of the displays. Not to mention, you can look at it here and see what it would have looked like in the 50s versus what it looks like in more modern days. You'll notice that everything has moved to a more digital display. There are numerous security cameras everywhere. They're making sure that everything is taken care of, and it would be a much more concise way to see what's going on. Now, the inside of the dam itself, pretty much the same as it was in 1959, but the control room is where many of the things have changed. In fact, they have made it more streamlined, more easy to navigate, more easy to access all of these different things by using better technology. And because of that, it can be used in a much more streamlined method of madness. Now, is an average person like you or me going to be able to go in there and punch a couple buttons and fix some things? Absolutely not. But for the people who are, they're moving forward with technology, which helps them to really stay on top of things. And I think that that's great. Again, right here you can find another cool display about Hydropower. Definitely encourage you to click on some of these things. It is touchscreen, but you can see that Hydropower is a major contributor to so many things in our everyday lives. And here you can see just how many markets are actually affected by Southwestern's transmission lines. And we can click on these little buttons right here and just hold down. And these are the lines themselves, and you'll notice they go through Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma. And then if we touch this other button, these are the customers, and the customers themselves light up with all of the different markets well into Louisiana and even into Texas in some cases. Now, in a time when we're looking for more power alternatives and things that are going to last a little bit longer, Hydropower is the gift that keeps giving, because we're going to have circulating water no matter what's going on, and they can turn this on and off with the drop of a dime. It's not that big of a deal to create faster moving water as they're pushing things downstream, and as long as we're continuing to have the water cycle repopulate the water in our area, this will always be an option, which is super cool. With that said, it only makes up approximately 4% at the time of the video in there, at least, of the total actual output of electricity, which I think is wild. That means we're still relying heavily on other things, but if they were to look into more options like this could be a valid way to offset some of that. Not maybe to replace it, but to offset and help. Now, something else kind of neat here, it says to crank slow and then change the dial. And so as you do, it will show you various items that you can actually power. So if we were to power an LED bulb, for example, let's see, right there, there it goes. Woo, that's kind of neat. Now, as we move into this section, it talks more about the watershed as a whole. And down here we have a few of the interesting facts that we might want to know. Good brain wrinkles. Now, here you can see what the White River watershed looks like as a whole. But within that watershed, they also have sub-watersheds or smaller ones. For example, this one right here is the Table Rock Lake area. So it's just one tiny part of the bigger part as a whole, which is really neat. But this is something that I found really interesting. It's all of the things that are challenges to the watershed. For example, herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, common household chemicals, things we don't think about. Farm animal waste. Yeah, farm animal waste can actually ruin your watershed. I did not know that until today. But these last two, petrochemicals from cars and soil erosion from sedimentation, those are some big ones. In fact, after seeing that, it's only fitting that this is the next display. What is your watershed footprint? It's another interactive display where you can touch the screen and find out how much that you are doing to save our fresh water. Did you know that only 2.5% of the Earth's water is actually fresh water? So we need to make sure that we're protecting it. And you might be actually surprised as to things you could do to protect the water. For example, recycling. Recycling is a big one. Also, not using asphalt on your driveway, instead using pavers. Having natural or native plants to the area. The native plants don't require as much water, so they are more likely to be a hardy plant that's going to stand up even in drought conditions in your region. By introducing invasive species or the really cute pretty plants, a lot of times we have to do daily watering, which depletes our water. But a couple of common things that people also do is they actually leave their water running when they're not using it, or run it while they're brushing their teeth. And that sounds absolutely silly, like how much water can really be going down the drain? But apparently a lot. As we move to this section, we learn a little bit more about the Corps of Engineers, and like I said, they have a really amazing history, and here you can learn a little bit more about some of that by watching the visuals that they have, which are just amazing, or reading through the timeline. For example, you can come over here and see that the Corps actually built ports, roads, and railroads for World War I, and they added the Flood Control Act here. They also played a part in World War II because they were helping to clear the beaches of Normandy, and they were erecting pontoon bridges. Did you know that the Corps of Engineers actually assumed the construction of the Washington Monument? Yeah, and that they built the first cast iron arch bridge? Isn't that crazy? That was in 1839. And then they built the Panama Canal. This is Wonders in the Ozarks. Now in this section we learn a bit more about the efforts that they have made with the local hatchery, which we may go to on another video. But did you know that by the numbers here, they have some very interesting facts? Inside this display you can also learn a bit more about different trout. You can see what they look like, and you can also learn about the different parts of them. Of course, trout are one of the main things that you can find in this area and are restocked pretty frequently. But trout are not alone. In fact, in this display, you can find all of the different things that they have found in these lake waters. There is also a wonderful section here about unwanted species, endangered species, and species that you can no longer find here at all. And I think that that is something that definitely needs to be seen by more people, because if you're out in the wild and you see one of these things, you need to know what it is, because if it's on an endangered list and you're seeing something so rare, you may never see it again. And I think that that's really significant. Pretty cool, right? But we're not finished yet. In fact, we're about to go upstairs to the 3rd floor, which is the top floor, and check out the observation deck. This thing is awesome, guys. And we're gonna take the elevator just because I want to show you the view from the elevator as we go up. Okay, here we are on the 3rd floor, and this floor is mostly just about this observation deck, just going to be very real with you, but there's some cool views from above, so again, let's look down below. From here, again, you can see that main area that has all of the cool information, and you might notice that from here you can get a better view of that beautiful tower right there with some of the interesting little critters on it. But ahead of us is that view, and I'm gonna have to put my sunglasses on because natural sun just hurts my poor sensitive weak eyes. And out we go. Whew, there's a crispness in the air today. But I can't wait to share this view, and yeah, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it. As you can see, guys, this is the overlook right here, and it does have these big clear walls on it, which can be a little bit intimidating, but at the same time, if you come out here, it is nice and sturdy. It doesn't really move or anything, and it gives you the best views of the dam that you will find from this side. Now, a couple of things. As we look at the dam itself, you can see the clear water lines along the various levels, and that is kind of interesting to see, because I know for a fact that I have been here when the water's been all the way up to that top ring around the bathtub, so to speak. But right now the water is a little bit lower, so despite the fact that it is lower, water is still being pushed out of the dam and downstream. It's just being done at a very small rate, and it's doing that by going inside the dam, moving through those turbines, those generators, and then being outputted on the other side. Now, the other side is where a lot of fishermen go as a result of both the hatchery being over there and them restocking in that region, but also because the way that the water pushes through, it makes for perfect conditions for trout fishing. That's right, trout fishing. Okay, and we made it back inside, and it's time for us to go to the final room of the Dewey Short, and then you guys can have the full picture of what it is that you need to come here and see and why. This has been a spectacular trip today, and this cost exactly $0. Something that you'll notice as you come to Branson is that a lot of the attractions here actually do have a pretty decent cost to them, but there are also a lot of things that you can do for absolute free, like coming out to the Dewey Short. It's a museum, it's beautiful, it has amazing views, a lot of history, some cool brain wrinkles, and definitely something you should check out. And again, you can't beat that price. Ooh, in this room we have something super cool. If you've never seen one of these are sand tables, and they help you to understand how watersheds and other unique spaces are created. And so on this, you can actually go in and move the sand, and you'll notice as you do, it moves the blue color, which signifies water. Now this is really neat because you could actually link all of these together by going in here and playing just a little bit, and it completely changes the landscape, much like it does whenever they build a dam or something. So that's kind of cool. In this section also we have some of the historic photos and also some of the newspaper articles. So here you find out about the flood in 1927. And along this wall right here are all of the historic construction photos from 1954 to 1958. Now, looking on at these photos, you can see what the dam looked like well before it was completed, and it's a very different story to see what it looked like then versus what it looks like now. Remember how earlier we talked about the race against time between February and May? Well, this is what it looked like when it actually crested over the construction, and despite the fact that it did this massive flow over and lasted weeks, very little damage was actually done to the structure itself. And so whenever this all stopped, they were able to continue the construction and finish the project. And all in all, that's it for here at the Dewey Short. I have had a blast sharing with you this amazing resource and also fun place to visit. It has been wonderful to see those views, and as the day is finally starting to heat up, it's time to get off to our next adventure. Remember guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time, and places like the Dewey Short definitely are that. You get new brain wrinkles and you have a good time to boot. It's well worth it and absolutely free. Till next time guys, bye!